Greetings and welcome to the channel. My name is Dr. Danajasi, Transformational Coach here at Inner Mileage Coaching, where we help folks understand the traumatic roots of their limited self-beliefs and how to take inspired action to overcome it. Today I want to talk about the Empath's Metamorphosis, new name, new world, new resonance. You see, this transmission is for the empath who senses something really profound. You're not who you were. You feel it in your bones, in your breath, in the subtle shift of what now resonates and what does not. And a new name emerges, which is a vibrational rebirth aligned to your higher soul integrity. So, throughout human history, the transformation of self has always been marked by the receiving or claiming of a new name. In African indigenous traditions, for example, names are not given lightly. In fact, they are bestowed following deep communal discernment, often after rites of passage. And these rites of passage signify that the individual has crossed a threshold from one state of being to another. When you look at it from an academic perspective, there's a seminal text on the rites of passage by Arnold van Gennep, who stated that the rites of passage meticulously document this tripartite structure, which is separation, liminality, and incorporation. And each phase demands a severance from previous identity contracts. Similarly, in the Judaic tradition, the renaming of Abram to Abraham and Sarai to Sarah marked a covenantal shift from individual existence to purpose-driven existence. This is in Genesis 17. Likewise, Saul became Paul after his Damascus experience, not just a conversion, but an ontological transformation. And the empath today stands at the same juncture. You, the empath, are being called to covenant with your purpose. So you think about the Hermetic maxim, as above, so below, reinforces that this renaming reflects a shift in correspondence, not just personally, but cosmically. And what you are doing is renaming yourself to realign with your true station in the cosmic hierarchy. Also, what happens when an empath releases their old identity is every vibrational field to which you were once attuned to begin to collapse, i.e. the people, the environments, behaviors, once familiar feel dissonant and abrasive. And in fact, there's research on biophoton emission that shows that human cells communicate through coherent light, and trauma distorts this coherence. So when an empath heals, the empath's light emission becomes more ordered, literally shifting how the empath resonates with reality itself. When you think about what Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, the Jesuit philosopher, wrote in The Phenomena of Man, what the Chardin wrote was that consciousness itself evolves in fields, suggesting that the empath's individual transformation contributes to a larger field evolution, a morphogenetic upgrade that dissolves old energetic contracts. In other words, the concept of baptism by fire in the Christian cosmology speaks to this burning away of the dross of the old identity, so that only the purified, coherent self remains. Now, when you think about this new self, or new name, if you may, fearlessness is not the absence of fear. It is the transcendence of the tyranny of fear. And when the empath sheds the old name or old identity, the fear that kept you, the empath, tethered to old trauma bonds begin to disintegrate. And in the Buddhist tradition, particularly the short tradition, the practitioner visualizes offering their own body as sustenance to demons, right? And this symbolically severs the attachment to ego and fear. Imagine giving yourself as an offering to evil. And then when you think about what a female Tibetan yogini mentioned, her name was Machik Labradon. She pioneered this practice as a method to achieve radical liberation from psychic attack and self-delusion. Furthermore, in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the initiate makes declarations of innocence before the tribunal of gods, unafraid and undefended, which is a testament to the interior purification process that yields fearlessness, Do you see? From a neuroscientific perspective, Dr. Andrew Huberman's recent work on neuroplasticity and fear extinction, and he's in Stanford, confirmed that repeated exposure to truth-based introspection rewires the amygdala's reactivity, therefore cultivating the fearless empath, not as a mystical metaphor, but as a neurological reality. This new name now also reauthors the purpose of the empath, meaning to reauthor purpose means to withdraw externally scripted narratives and to assume mastery of one's own narrative, right? This is very, very important. And in research, there's this theory of dialogism, which underscores that our identity has been shaped by polyphonic voices such as our parents, teachers, culture, all of which are competing for primacy, you see. And the empath's metamorphosis is a refusal to allow any voice but their own authentic resonance to author the narrative henceforth. Similarly, in Hindu philosophy, this act mirrors the concept of svadharma, which is one's own duty, which is distinct from societal duty, dharma. And for example, in the Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 3, Lord Krishna exhorts Arjuna to follow his own path, even if imperfectly, rather than adopt another's path perfectly. This is why so many empaths feel isolated after a transformation, and they are now authoring their path according to soul integrity, not societal expectation, because isolation is confirmation. But when you go further into this collective morphogenesis, when an empath rises, it's not private. In fact, in Rupert Sheldrake's work on morphic resonance theory, it posits that shifts in consciousness by one individual create informational fields accessible to all others of similar resonance. I mean, think about that. Shifts in consciousness by one individual creates informational fields accessible to all others of similar resonance. So in anthropology, there's this analysis of communities where particularly ritual purposes, and the researcher Turner described liminal moments that dissolve status hierarchies and forge collective reordering. And that's a phenomenon happening now as empaths globally shed old names, old narratives, and claim authentic lives. In the Jewish tradition, Talmudic principle of Kol Yisrael Arevim Ze Bazeh, meaning all Israel is responsible for one another. Israel meaning the awakened ones, right? Not the country. Suggests that the transformation of one empath has ripple effects on the entire empathic community. In occult philosophy, particularly the teachings of Alice Bailey specifically, there is the notion that when the disciple achieves inner harmony, they contribute immediately to the harmonization of the planetary grid. So if this sounds like you, type transform in the comment section if it can be of help to you. Now I want to talk about the inner-outer orientation, because the empath's new orientation is now radically internal. Therefore, external metrics like titles, money, approval, all these things lose value because the true metric becomes inner coherence. When you think about the Buddha's final exhortation in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, be islands unto yourselves, be your own refuge. That calls the empath home to their own center, signaling that the source of authority is now internal. The empath who orients towards beginning to see outward success as a byproduct of coherence realizes that the source of all of this is internal. So after the metamorphosis, curation becomes essential. The empath must now live as the Egyptian priests lived at Karnak, aware that every item in the environment emits a frequency. When you think about the Vajra circles drawn around tantric temples, these were not decorative. They were energetic boundaries designed to repel incoherent vibrations. So I'll end with this Christian quote which says in Proverbs 4:23, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. The empath's job now is to ruthlessly guard the resonance field that sustains their new name. So finally, I want to say you're not crazy out of place. You're not lost or shedding what no longer resonates. You are ascending. Keep embracing your new name and new narrative, and realize there's absolutely no one like you. Peace and light.